I will keep it Uhuru v. Maraga 2020. And on my kicker tonight, I shall revisit President Kenyatta's Madaraka Day speech, and revisit I shall, pun intended. A short 10 days ago, President Kenyatta invoked names of the country's independence leaders, called them founders of the nation, acknowledging them as such by name, some of them, I believe, for the first time ever by any administration since independence. Then the president pitched his case for what he called reimagining Kenya, specifically its dream and nationhood. In paragraph 18 of the speech, the president posed a question: how did the original blueprint of Project Kenya look like? He then asked Kenyans to make a historical inquiry in response to that question and others raised in his speech. The president then referred to the adoption of the founding fathers by the founding fathers of the sessional paper number 10 of 1965, an economic vision document titled African Socialism and its Application to Planning in Kenya. Though the paper is attributed to Economic Planning Minister Tom Mboya and his Assistant Minister Mwai Kibaki, sessional paper number 10 was first drafted by an American expatriate deployed as an advisor to the government of Kenya. But on making a historical inquiry, one will also find that by 1965, a mere 2 years after independence, the founding fathers were already falling out and the dream was coming apart. Sessional paper number 10 was an ideological victory paper for the conservative wing of the founding fathers and was launched exactly 2 months and 3 days after the assassination of Pio Gamapinto, the main brain trust of the liberal wing of the founding fathers, and who, historical accounts claim, was preparing an alternative, more African and more socialist sessional paper for consideration of Parliament. Other than Pio Gamapinto's death, 1965 and going all the way to 1969 is brimming with illustrations of a horrendously imperfect start to our nationhood, a dream resting on the cusp of a nightmare. To reimagine Kenya, therefore, that imperfect start must be confronted. The country must be set on the path towards the Kenyan equivalent of what Americans call a more perfect union. As a second-term president, President Uhuru Kenyatta should be well placed to lead the country through the first steps down this path. But that responsibility carries with it some silent conditions. Let me voice just two. First, the president's own intentions must be sincere and selfless, and they must be seen to be so. His intentions must be incapable of inviting doubts or suspicion. Secondly, the president must be able, willing, and strong enough to walk away from bad advice. And without a doubt, there is plenty of bad advice around President Uhuru Kenyatta. The ongoing row with Chief Justice David Maraga, for example, is only the latest illustration that there is no shortage of bad advice around the president. And bad advice, especially one clothed politically with that false sense of invincibility, can be audacious, daring, and bold. How else can one explain the narrative of an attorney general that is a member and sits in the Judicial Service Commission, participates in the interviews and selection of judges, then turns around to advise the president against the same appointments he, the attorney general, was part of? Bad advice aside, the president should not have the slightest doubt that he will be judged by some Kenyans entirely on the row with the Chief Justice, which many believe stems from his angry promise to revisit the judiciary after the nullification of the Supreme Court by the Supreme Court of the apparently dubious results of the August 8th, 2017 presidential election. A whole 3 years later, and aggrieved as he may be, it is the president's turn to accept and move on. In paragraph 15 of his Madaraka Day speech 10 days ago, the president said, and I quote, "If we repeatedly feed our national psyche with negative energy, we become a nation of angry people." End of quote. Now, negative energy on the psyche of the nation is what we are witnessing in the feud between the presidency, or the executive arm of the government, and the judiciary. The president must lead the way by ending his feud with the Chief Justice and formally bringing to a close that famous chapter he introduced as "We shall revisit." Only then can the president take on the greater task of reimagining Kenya without the burden of anger and vengeance, and without inviting doubts and suspicions about his latest intentions on the constitutional reforms he is now championing. In paragraph 30 of his Madaraka Day speech, President Kenyatta spoke of the place of the right mindset in the process of imagining and building a nation. In paragraphs 32, he spoke of faith and intentions, quoting what he termed the deep teachings and convictions of the founding fathers. Because of the mindset and because of intentions, it becomes pertinent that the president takes another look at his advisors if this reimagination and constitutional moment thing is to be realized. If advisors can mislead the president on the constitutional spaces of the arms of government, particularly the judiciary, then you can only imagine where such advisors can take the president's imagination in reimagining the Kenyan dream. Bad advice is capable of taking the president back to 1965, and the current events in the Houses of Parliament today are not particularly flattering. And so, as he reimagines the Kenyan dream, the president must be mindful of the mindset and intentions of those that inform his perspectives. From out here, let him stand advised that bad advice did not only waste his entire first term, but also delayed his second term by a whole 3 years. Bad advice can cost President Kenyatta the remaining 2 years of his term and the last chance of a legacy. And the harsh judgment of history will not be on the bad advisors, but on the president himself. That is my kicker.
Tumesikia. Okay.